Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about nesting arrays and objects together. Now in the last assignment, we actually nested arrays inside of objects. Okay, but this time we're going to use one of the most common, I don't, maybe it's not the most common, but it's a very common data structure that we see in JavaScript. And knowing how to handle it is a good thing. Okay, so it's an array of objects. So here's what you want to do. Create a O19 array of objects, have an index file, have a main, and code along with me. And then when we're done, that's your message. Okay, so I'm going to move over to VS Code. Do I already have it up? Yeah, if I don't, I'm going to start my server. I do have a div that's centered, so do I have that CSS? Oh, I need to bring that CSS over so I could do that. Just copy it and paste it in there so I have it. I have to afterwards make sure I have. Do I have it on do I have on the index? Oh, I do. Okay, good. I have that there. So then I went and copied over the update DOM just so I didn't have to rewrite it. So you can go get that. I mean, we've used it a couple places, so you can go get that as well. And I'm just for now going to roll that up so it's not in the way. Okay, so what is an array of objects? Well, let's say constant, right? My array obj. Okay, so equal to that's funny. Equal to an array literal. Okay, so we're again just defining an array here. Now, what's going to go inside of this array, in this case, are objects. And what you want to have is you want to have a standardized way each object is set up, the same kind of data in each, right? We're still going to be using key value pairs. That's true. And we could nest inside of here, but for our example here, keep it simple. I'm actually going to paste in some data just so you don't have to have me type in a minute. But before that, right? So we could say name, right? I know this is really, oh, right. And then now, comma, right? Because now, so that's the first entry in the array is an object. And just like when we were doing arrays before, each entry is separated by a comma. Okay, now remember, a comma inside of here would make another object or another property on that. So we could do like hair color. I'm going to try something new. Red, right? So understanding the syntax first is important, right? And the other thing is, right? Hey, like let that thing format it for me. Notice how it does it, right? So now I have one object in the array. So what I'd want to do, let's say, and you could make up your own data here, right? So I could copy this over. Now I have the second object, right? Joe has black hair, right? Oh, and I wouldn't want to add, you could, but you wouldn't want to because typically you don't. You have somewhat of a consistent, at least for this beginning. Now, when you're actually dealing with arrays of objects out in the world, trust me, they're going to be nested in all kinds of ways. So learning how to do this basic structure and how to iterate through it is important. Okay. So now I'll do one more just so I have it. So let's say Jane has what color? Brown. Okay. So now we have 3 entries inside of here. Very simple array of objects. So now because we've learned in our looping over arrays the different ways you can loop over it. You can write a for loop. You might remember I happen to be fond of the for each loop, so that's what I'm going to write. Okay. So I'm going to write and first I'm going to reference my array of objects. Okay. And then I'm going to say dot for each. Okay. And so now what happens is it's iterating over each object in the array. So I need to call each object something. I could just call it obj, not because, or I could call it entry, or I could call it each. Okay. Doesn't matter what I call it right there. Right. OBJ kind of makes sense to me. Right. So what am I going to do with each object? Remember, what happens here is it references, like, first time around, it grabs this one, second time around here, third time around here. So this is a callback function. And we haven't talked a lot about callback functions, but we're seeing them again. Again, you may be writing, it's fine if you write a different iteration. I don't care. You might want to do this one if you're not sure. So now let's just do this, console.log obj. All right, let's see if all my code's good to go. Let's go ahead and fire up live server and see what she says. Array of objects. Do I have any errors? Looks like no, right? Here. Did I get any output? I did, right? So here's my output. So I got the first time around, I got the first object, right? If we go to sources, we can see this, right? Cool. Make sense? Right? Okay, so now let's do a little more work with it. Let's actually do something with this. Okay, so now let's actually set up, let's say constant string equals. And now we'll do a template string, right? That says something like maybe Jane. So we'd say, how would we reference in a template string Jane inside of this loop? Well, right, we know it's an object, and on the object, right, the first one, we know its name. We would be grabbing Jane, or sorry, Rio, out of the first entry in the array, which we know is 0 index, but we don't have to be concerned about that unless we're writing a for loop. Okay, if you're writing a for loop, then you do. That's why I like the for each, right? Has, we'd say, right? OBJ, hair color. And then I would say has hair color. Cool. So now what we can do, sorry, duper. Now we can just call update DOM, and we could pass in the string. And then I think I called it output. Let's see if I got that right. Okay, so in here, yeah, let's have a div called output. So now, look at that, right? We can see it now. So that's what it did. It iterated through, right? Now that's a very simple example. But there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind, right? Is how to reference based on the way you're iterating. Now, I've already talked about that a little bit, but this would be a good one to play with, to actually write the for loop and play with it that way. Totally do that. So what we're going to do next, right, is we're actually going to refactor the mileage program to have, keep track the data in an array of objects. Now, the code's going to have to change a little more for that one. And I actually haven't written that code yet. I'm going to go write it now and then talk about that refactor itself. But the more you play with this, right, the easier that refactor is going to be. And just understanding it is such a good thing. Okay. So in this case, right, commit this code that you wrote, and then I'll see what you played around with as array of objects. And then I'm going to go do the refactor and then talk about it. Okay.